All right, meeting called to order at 5:16. Before we begin, as a courtesy to others, we ask that you please silence your cell phones or any other type of noise devices. Also, this meeting is being interpreted, and we ask everyone addressing the board to speak clearly and slowly for interpretation. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the April 17th, 2024 regular meeting of the Richmond Rent Board. Tonight, we will begin the meeting with an open session to hear public comments before closed session. The first item on the agenda is the roll call. For the purpose of the recording, may I please get an audible roll call from Rent Board members and staff? Board Member Dawkins?
Present.
Yes?
Just check to see if the interpreter has an issue.
Can you hear me? She's interpreting.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure it was.
It's not working.
Oh, it's not working? I'm sorry.
Not working.
Oh, that's not working? Okay. Maybe that one is not charged.
Here comes the IT guy.
Thank you. You're good? You can hear it now? Okay, perfect. Sorry about that. Okay, so can we resume? Is it good to resume now? She's good, okay. We were at roll call. Board Member Dawkins?
Present.
Okay. Board Member Espinoza?
Present.
Board Member Height?
Here.
Vice Chair Guadalupe?
Here.
Executive Director Nicholas Traylor?
Here.
Deputy Director Fred Tran?
Present.
And General Counsel Charles Oshanuga.
Here.
For the record, Chair Sarah Cantor is absent. The next item on the agenda is public comment before closed session. The purpose of open session is for the Rent Board to hear public comment on the following items to be discussed in closed session. The item for discussion under closed session is Public Employee Evaluation, Government Code Section 54957, title Executive Director. This item was continued from the April 9th, 2024 special Rent Board meeting. Tonight do we have any speakers for closed session, open session? Open session. Okay. Okay, we have no speakers on this item. So since we have no speakers on this item, we will now adjourn to closed session. The open session to hear public comment before closed session is adjourned at 5:19. Okay, let's begin our regular scheduled meeting called to order at 6:02. Again, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the April 17th, 2024 regular meeting of the Richmond Rent Board. Before we begin, as a courtesy, I'm going to repeat myself again. To others, we ask that you please silence your cell phones or any other type of noise devices. Also, I want to go over a few reminders regarding public comments. Individuals who would like to address the board, a request to speak card must be given to the assistant clerk before the announcement of the agenda item. If you would like to speak on an item not listed on the agenda or on the consent calendar, you must do so under the public forum. Please refer to the Rent Board meeting agenda for the list of items or the agenda items list open for public comment posted above the table located in front of the chambers. Also, this meeting is being interpreted, and we ask anyone addressing the board to speak clearly and slowly for interpretation. The first item on the agenda is pledge to the flag. Please join me in pledge of allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, in liberty and justice for all. The next item on the agenda is roll call. For the purpose of the recording, may I please get an audible roll call for board members and staff? Board Member Dawkins,
Present.
Board Member Espinoza,
Present.
Board Member Height,
Here.
Vice Chair Guadalupe,
Here.
Executive Director Nicholas Traylor,
Here.
Deputy Director Fred Tran,
Present.
General Counsel Charles Oshanuga.
Here.
For the record, Chair Cantor is absent. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is statement of conflict of interest. Are there any? Hearing none, the next item on the agenda is report from legal counsel of final decisions made in closed session.
There were no final decisions made.
Okay. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is agenda review. Are there any changes to the agenda?
Are there any changes to the agenda from staff?
No changes from staff.
Are there any other changes to the agenda from board members?
Okay, hearing none. The next item on the agenda is public forum. Tonight we have one speaker. The speaker shall be allowed up to 4 minutes to address the board. Please occupy the front row seats behind the speaker's podium when your name is called. When you are called to address the board, stating your name and city of residence is optional. Please terminate your address to the board when your time expires. We ask that you keep your comments respectful and appropriate. The speaker is Ms. Alana Clark. You could come forward. Okay. Hold on one second. Is it on? Let me make sure. Yeah, press the button.
You're asking me to do technological things, and I don't know.
You have it. Thank you.
Can you hear? Can you guys hear? Okay. All right. My name is Alana Clark. I live in Richmond. I'm a housing provider in Richmond and a member of Association of United Richmond Housing Providers. I apologize in advance if my statement today seems patronizing or disrespectful. I am feeling frustrated. Anyway, here goes. This is a quote. The purpose is to promote neighborhood and community stability, healthy housing, and affordability for renters in the city of Richmond by controlling excessive rent increases and arbitrary evictions to the greatest extent possible under California law, while ensuring a landlord's fair and reasonable return of their investment and protecting homeowners. I don't know if you recognize that, but that is the mission statement of this body. There is nothing in here about spending time and resources on self-congratulatory placards or public arts projects. If you hadn't noticed, we are in a major housing crisis. The housing shortage cannot be directly addressed by this body. There's nothing in the mission statement that adds units to Richmond's housing stock. However, there is still plenty to do regarding housing specifically. If you lack ideas, please contact me or other members of our group, the Association of United Richmond Housing Providers. We are housing providers. We are struggling to provide housing for our community under many layers of regulations and cost burdens. We are part of the solution, but we cannot do it alone. Here are a few ideas on how you can help people in the community. The RAP website advertises sources for rental assistance. Are they effective? How much money has been given out, and how many renters or units have benefited? There is nothing about down payment assistance for would-be homeowners. This is probably low-hanging fruit that you could make a big difference on. You can revisit some of the regulations that previous boards have passed and make them more practical, beneficial, and easier to understand for those who are not experts in the housing industry or our current housing crisis. You can research the Richmond rent program's processes to make them more streamlined, user-friendly, and have easier to access. You can assist in the process of creating robust processes to address HLRs, which was promised to us by Mr. Traylor himself, but that he has not quite gotten around to. You can help provide reliable interpretation for all meetings, whether Ms. Espinoza is here or not. Richmond is more than half Latinx. We need interpretation regardless. There are so many things that you can do with your position as rent board members. The staff does not have to listen to us, but they do have to listen to you. Please use your position on this board to the benefit of the community of Richmond within the aforementioned mission statement. Otherwise, I think you need to ask yourselves, what are you doing here? Thank you.
That was the last speaker and the only speaker. The next item on the agenda is to approve the consent calendar. The list of consent calendar items are: item G1, approve the minutes of the January 17, 2024 regular meeting of the Richmond Rent Board. This item was continued from the April 29, 2024 special Rent Board meeting. Item G2, received letters from community members regarding the Fair Rent Just Cause for Eviction and Homeowners Protection Ordinance, RMC 11.100. Item G3, received the fiscal year 2023 through 24 monthly activity report through March 2024. Item G4, received the rent program fiscal year 2023 through 2024 monthly revenue and expenditure report through March 2024. Item G5, received the budgeted versus the actual revenue and expenditures report for the third quarter ending March 31st, 2024. And item G6, approved late fee waivers for April 2024 pursuant to Regulation 425.
Is there a motion?
Oh, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the consent calendar.
Is there a second?
I second the motion.
Okay. Madam Clerk, can we please take a vote?
Sure. Board Member Dawkins?
Yes.
Board Member Espinoza?
Yes.
Board Member Height?
Yes.
Vice Chair Guadalupe?
Yes.
Motion passes with Chair Cantor absent. Okay. We're now moving to item H1 under consideration of appeals. Item H1 is an appeal to petition number RC 22-T155. The appellants appeal the hearing examiner's decision that awarded respondents $1,141.46 due to defective conditions existing in respondents' rental unit. Specifically, the hearing examiner found that the appellant failed to meet their obligation under a settlement agreement where they failed to repair the windows, refrigerator, and remediate mold within respondents' rental unit. On appeal, appellants contend the following: the amount of rent the hearing examiner relied on is incorrect. The proper rent amount is $800, not $955.11. 2, the refrigerator should not be included in an award because the issue was immediately addressed. On the same day, respondent made the request for a new refrigerator. Appellants purchased a new refrigerator. However, delivery was going to take a few days. In the interim, appellants responded a temporary refrigerator, but the respondent rejected it, opting to wait for the new one. This item was continued from the April 9th, 2024 special rent board meeting. There are no speakers, public speakers on this item.
Thank you. First, I would like to remind parties and the public that this appeal hearing is being interpreted, and we ask that you speak clearly and slowly for interpretation. This is a landlord appeal to the hearing examiner's decisions. For the record, please identify yourselves, state your name and your position on this case, and we will start with the appellant and then the respondent.
Creo que se van a sentar. Ok, ya.
So she asked that the parties state their name, starting with you.
Señor, se tiene que parar y decir.
Yes, my name is Carlos Magana.
Tiene que pararse.
Que se pare.
Que se pare.
Yeah, my name is Carlos Magana.
I'm sorry, can you also state whether or not you're the appellant or the respondent?
I'm the appellant.
Mi nombre es Juana Trejo.
My name is Juana Trejo. Juana.
Sí.
Yeah, she's responding.
Thank you all. Before we begin, let's go over a few appeal hearing procedures. First, the legal staff will give a summary of the case. Next, each party or their representatives will have 7 minutes to address the board. Any party addressing the board who requires interpretation, the allowable times shall be doubled. Because the respondent has requested interpretation, the time limits are as follows. Appellant starts first and will have 10 minutes to present his or her case on appeal. Next, the respondent will be given 14 minutes to present their rebuttal. Finally, the appellant will be giving 4 additional minutes to close. The board has the discretion to allow more time. Also, as a reminder, this is not a de novo hearing, therefore no new evidence can be submitted. Anything that is said tonight should be based on the issue raised on appeal and exclusively on the record that was before the hearing examiner. Parties may discuss or comment upon legal matters in questions and other pertinent issues raised by the appeal. The board must disregard any discussion or comment regarding factual matters that were not in the record before the hearing examiner or officially noticed in the hearing documents. After all the parties have spoken, the board will discuss and then make a decision. We will now hear from legal staff.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Charles Oceanuga, General Counsel. I will now be giving the summary, and the interpreter, if I'm speaking too fast, just let me know. This is an appeal that appeals a hearing examiner's decision that granted the tenant's petition. The tenant filed originally a petition for excess rent, unlawful rent charges, and habitability issues. The appellant/landlord filed their objections, their response, and the matter was set for a hearing. Before the parties went to a hearing, the hearing examiner offered them a chance to engage in settlement discussions. The parties both agreed to engage in those discussions. They were both advised that if you enter into a settlement, that it was not appealable. The parties eventually entered into a settlement, thereby avoiding a hearing. regulation, the rent board regulation 832D states that parties who prior to a hearing reach an agreement on an individual adjustment which is approved by the hearing examiner shall be deemed to have waived their rights to a hearing or appeal on the petition. Now, despite that rent board rule that has always been enforced, has always been the program's practice, a few months after the parties had entered the agreement, the tenant/respondent contacted the rent program's office and indicated that the landlord/appellant had violated the agreement. After some discussion, the rent program sent the parties a notice of follow-up. I believe it's a notice of follow-up discussion. Give me one sec. A notice of follow-up hearing. That's a notice that has never been issued by the program. The parties were ordered to return back to the rent program's office for a follow-up discussion and hearing. At that discussion, quote unquote, the hearing examiner automatically undid the settlement agreement and swore the parties both in and had a full hearing on the petition that was originally submitted. The hearing examiner eventually found the landlord was in violation of not only the settlement agreement, but also that the issues raised in the petition were warranted, and ultimately awarded the tenant/respondent around approximately $1,100, a little bit more than that. The appellant/landlord appealed, and we're here now. After reviewing the case, looking at all the law, listening to the hearing, and reviewing our regulations, my recommendation was pretty simple. You can find it on page 13. It was to reverse the hearing examiner's decision in its entirety. The settlement agreement is still in effect, minus the provisions that reserve the tenant's right to a hearing. The parties do, however, reserve the right to pursue civil claims that flowed from any alleged breach of the agreement. In other words, my recommendation was for the rent board to follow its own rules that has always been in place. When the parties settled the case, the parties waive their rights to a hearing and appeal on the issues that were part of the original petition. The parties settled their case here. They cannot come back and argue issues in the original petition. If there is an alleged breach, the parties would have to go into superior court to adjudicate those issues. Settlement agreement, even though the rent board was part of the negotiations or mediated a settlement agreements are between private parties and they're enforced in court. The rent board loses its jurisdiction after the parties enter into an agreement, unless the agreement was to waive any rights under the ordinance that are against public policy. And with that, I'll pass it back to you, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, General Counsel Oshinugwa. Are there any questions or responses from members of the board? Okay, I have a question. If we were to not go with your recommendation and follow the hearing examiners or make our own thing, would that then make a new precedent for moving forward? Like, would it affect the fact that if they settled, they cannot be appealed? Would it affect that in any way?
Yes, it would. Good question, yes. Any decision of the rent board is a final decision, and your decisions have precedential impact or effect, which means that what you articulate as your decision in the future must be consistent with your practices. And decisions that go against your established practices or your established rules can easily be overturned by a lawsuit of the aggrieved party. You know, if you get sued, for instance, by a party who loses here, they have to make an argument. And if the argument can show that you're not being consistent with either your rules or your precedent, it's a lot easier to make that argument.
Understood. Thank you for that. Okay. If there are no more questions, we will now hear from the parties. Appellant will present first and then the responding.
Okay. Well, it's very clear over there as I gave my why I'm appealing, because it's the decision that the examiner did. He did the wrong numbers. That's why I'm appealing. And since we finished the work, we were done with the work there, and he still want me to give money to the tenants. That's why I'm like, I'm not willing to give the money because I already fixed the unit. That's my only issue. I think it's not fair because I already fixed the place. The place is fixed already and no more issues. And also about he put the rent as $9.55 and 11 cents when it's supposed to be 800. As it's mentioned here, it's very clear. Like, that's the only reason I'm appealing. I don't need that much time to speak. I only need, I'm just saying that I'm not willing to pay that money, to grant that money to the tenants.
Are you waiving the rest of your time, or?
I don't know what else to say. It's just that's what it is. I'm trying, I guess I don't know if the tenant agrees with me, but since everything is fixed, we should just go back to whatever it is, but not granting that money to them, because there were no damages after that, like physical damages or whatever it is.
Okay. You're done? That's it?
Yeah, I guess that's it.
All right. Would you like the respondent to go? Okay.
Sí, buenas noches. Yo estoy aquí,
Good
porque
evening. I'm
yo,
here because
de las paredes. Todo arregló el señor y tuvimos la junta con ustedes y él estuvo de acuerdo de tumbar las paredes. No las tumbó,
Okay.
nomás las pintó. Yo me tuve que salir 2 veces del apartamento. Yo también yo no.
Hold on, she has to interpret, sorry.
so we have a meeting with you guys where the appellant told that he's going to fix the walls, and after that he agreed to turn down the walls, but he only painted. And she have to leave the place. Señora,
ahead.
¿por cuántos días se tuvo que salir de su departamento?
La primera vez se me hace que por 4 a 5 días.
She have to leave her place 2 times. The first time for between 4 to 5 days, and the second time, y la segunda vez,
También como por 5 días salí para
de
otro
4 a
lugar.
5 días. Okay, tengo una pregunta. ¿Las paredes tienen moho o qué es lo que pasa? Yo no entiendo.
No, es que las paredes tenían cuando empezamos el caso, entonces
Okay,
se
when
hizo
we
la
start the case, the walls have mold.
y se hizo la reunión
And we have a meeting with you guys.
dijeron que tumbara las paredes y
Okay.
él no las tumbó, solo las pintó. Y
So
yo
we
me tuve que
agree
salir
here in the
2
meeting that
veces.
he have to turn down the walls, but he didn't fix that in that way. He only painted.
Entonces salió el mojo, entonces yo le avisé a él y él pasaron los días y hasta después contestó y también tuve que yo avisar aquí porque tenemos un caso.
Okay, and so when the situation happened, I contact you guys and suppose that we have to fix it. And I also called him, and he came back and he painted the walls, but the mall is back again.
pero él ya resolvió el problema. Él tumbó las paredes y puso las paredes nuevas, lo pintó y yo no me niego a pagar lo que me corresponde, lo que dice la ley.
Okay, so after the meeting that we have with you guys, the walls were turned down and he fixed the walls and everything, and I'm agreed to make the payment that I can do or that I have to do. Pero ¿cuál es el problema? ¿Usted no quiere pagar el monto que él dice?
No, el que él dice, no, él, lo que digan aquí de aquí del control de renta, lo que él me dice, no, lo que diga el control de renta, sí lo pago.
Okay. She wants to make the payment, know what he demands. He only wants to make the payment according what you think is fair for her to pay. But she's not going to pay anything that he say unless you guys agree with that payment.
Y yo estoy de acuerdo en todo lo que quieran, yo estoy flexible para, aquí estoy. So,
Okay, so I'm here and I'm present, and I want you to know that I want to do I'm willing to do the payment, depends on your decisions.
Okay, muchas gracias. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Do I move to the second part? Or? Yes. Okay.
Okay, no vamos a ir a la segunda parte.
Okay. You have 4 minutes to respond.
Okay, well, again, like, I guess she's agreeing. Like, the thing is, the rent, to raise the rent, I guess I have to go to the rent, That's a totally different thing, right? So that's fine. So what I understand that what she said, that she's going to continue paying $800, of course. That's because that's the rent. That's what she's paying right now, $800. Okay, not $955. So the only thing I want to make sure that she's understanding that I'm not willing to pay, or if she agrees with me too, that since she said that I already fixed everything, like I don't have to pay that much money to her, because that's what it means, right? I have to give her that much money. And what I'm trying to say that I'm not willing to do that, because I don't think it's fair, because I already fixed everything. And as we talk in the previous meetings, you guys have the record. Like I'm not a big investor, so I'm a beginner. So like we were trying to do our best, but so I mean it happened what happens. But that's the only thing. This is simple. We just need to make the decision that she's paying $800 for rent, and we just erase the $1,141.46 that I have to give her. That's also my issue. I don't think it's fair that to give her that much money, but I don't know what she thinks, right? So I guess that's like straightforward. Again, I just think that money I should not give her. Done.
Done.
Thank you, both parties. Are there any questions or responses from members of the board?
I'm pretty confused.
Yo no entiendo cuál dinero.
Yeah, I'm confused as to exactly what's happening. So the rent is now just $800 a month? You didn't raise it to $9?
No, well, in the beginning, we wanted to raise it to, what was that? I think 13 or 1,500.
Yeah.
But, because I did not know the rules, right? So,
Right.
anyways, so the examiner, he said that I raised the rent to, I don't remember what was that, but he put it $955,
Yeah,
which not
that's
950.
allowable maximum.
Yeah, but he put that's the rent that she's been paying, but no, she's been paying $800.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so she's
And
been
and
paying
you're still charging her 800?
800. Yeah.
When are you going to raise it
I'm sorry.
Are you going to raise it when all the work's done, or at this? That's where I'm confused.
After all of this, it's over, I will raise whatever the city allows.
Any other questions? Okay. I had a question. What was the original settlement between the two of you?
Aquí cuando tuvimos la junta con ustedes, quedó que 955 era mi renta y se iba a pagar hasta que no acabáramos el caso, que él arreglara y se cerrara el caso. Iba yo a empezar a pagar ese monto. Yo no entiendo cuál monto, cuál dinero dice que me va a pagar, no entiendo, necesito que me explique.
Okay. In the meeting that we came here, the agreement was 955, and suppose that we're going to pay that rent until the case is over when he finished fixing everything. I don't really understand what is the amount of money that he said that he have to pay to me. I'm confused. That's what she said.
Chair, or Vice Chair, if I may.
Yes, please.
The settlement agreement, it's on attachment D of the staff recommendation. So you can see it's about a two-page, about three-page agreement. I think you should all have it.
What page was that? Sorry.
It's attachment D, the tab, it would be under the 8th tab, past the recommendation, and you just gotta,
Gotcha. You said attachment D?
yes, D as in dog. It's gonna be past the pictures, I believe. You gotta go, Vice Chair, I can kind of see your papers. You gotta go further into the document. Oh, you found it, great. It's attachment D, as in dog. It's under the 8th tab. Flip through the. I can lend her my copy if she needs it.
Looking at the original settlement agreement, why wasn't it? What happened that you guys weren't able to comply with that? I know the tenant mentioned that you weren't able to follow the original settlements. Why was that?
Well, in the first place, we tried, like she said, we tried to fix it by painting it, but we also used some kind of chemicals to try to get rid of the mold and then paint it over. I also sent the evidence, pictures of the evidence. I'm not sure if it's here on the attachments, but I did send it. But yeah, it didn't work. In a few days, the mold came back out. So, like she said, we had to go back and fix it. In that time, yes, we turned down the walls and we changed everything, and then we painted back again. So yeah, I mean, yeah, in the first place, we thought that would work, but it did not work. The painting and all the chemicals to kill the mold, it didn't work. So after that, then we had the hearing again, and then we had to go back and fix. So, but this time, as she's saying, the wall, everything's fixed now. The unit is in perfect conditions. Like I said, the only thing I think she's misunderstanding that. I don't even know if she's aware that the city wants me to give her money. So I don't know, maybe they can clarify that for her, that, that's why I'm appealing, that I'm not willing, I'm not willing to give her that money because I already fixed it. And I believe that she will agree with me that there's no need for me to give her the money because also the 2 times that she went out, for us to fix the place, we paid the hotel for her. So, I mean, everything's taken care of, so.
Okay. Thank you for that. Are there any other questions from the board? No? Okay. Okay. Seeing no further questions, Madam Clerk, please call the public speakers, if any.
Sí, yo del
there's no,
dinero yo no sabía.
Oh, sorry.
She can talk or no?
No.
No, todavía no.
There are no speakers on this item.
Thank you for that. Is there a motion? Can I make a motion? Or no?
Yeah.
Yes? Okay. I make a motion that we go with General Counsel's recommendation to reverse the hearing examiner's decision in its entirety. The settlement agreement is still in effect, less the provision that reserves the tenant's right to a hearing. The parties do, however, reserve the right to pursue civil claims following from any alleged breach of the agreement. Okay. Do we have a second?
I second the motion. I second the motion.
Okay, Board Member Dawkins. Okay, can I take a vote? Board Member Dawkins.
Yes.
Board Member Espinoza.
Yes.
Board Member Height.
Yes.
Vice Chair Guadalupe.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes to approve the recommendation of General Counsel with Chair Cantor absent. So what this means is this now concludes your hearing. I don't know if you had something to add, but you will receive a decision based on what was decided tonight in 30 days. So this will conclude your hearing, but he can probably, if you had something to add.
No, just that if there's any confusion, please contact the rent program staff members to explain to you what just happened. I can just generally tell you that the landlord challenged the hearing examiner's decision to award the tenant money. But the hearing examiner didn't have the ability to even consider that award because you settled your case the first time. When you settle your case the first time, you don't have a right to a hearing or appeal. If there's any issues with your settlement agreement, you have to go to court to figure out those issues. If there are any new issues with your unit, if the tenant experiences any new issues with their unit, they can come to the rent board and file more petitions if you like. My general rule of thumb that I tell people is if you're confused, just come to the rent board anyways, and we will help you out. But that's what happened in this hearing today. The rent board decided that your settlement agreement is still in place. The landlord still needs to meet any of the obligations in those agreements. The tenant's rent is still $800. The $955, that amount is the maximum allowable rent. That means that's the maximum allowed for this unit. How quickly you can get there is dependent on the current year's CPI. So if you want to raise the rent in the future, I would encourage you to speak with rent program staff members before you do that. They can help you calculate that. Tenant, if you have any issues with your unit, I encourage you to speak with rent program staff members. They can help you navigate that. But that's it for this hearing. Thank you.
Thank you. That's it. Thank you.
I'm sorry. So I cannot raise the rent until you guys take the decision.
The rent board has decided that the hearing examiner's decision that gave the tenant money, that part of the decision is no longer in place. You don't have to pay the tenant $1,140 or whatever it was. But the rent board has also decided that the settlement agreement you and the tenant entered into is still in effect. You still have to meet, if there's any existing issues, they still need to be corrected, and that the tenant's rent is still $800. If you choose to raise that rent, you should speak to a rent program staff member before you do that because of that existing settlement agreement. Does that make sense?
Great, yeah, got it.
Thank you.
Yes.
If you guys are going to stay for the meeting, you can keep the headsets, but don't forget to turn them in if you leave. Okay? Thank you. Okay, we're now moving to item I-1 under regulations. Item I-1 is to amend the language of Regulation 322A, 322AB, and 322AC. This item was continued from the April 9th, 2024 special rent board meeting. There are no speakers on this item.
Thank you. We'll now hear the staff report.
There is no staff report. This item was brought forward from Board Member Dawkins. So Board Member Dawkins will be
So
speaking
we
on
have
this
an-
item.
Thank you. We have an agenda report concerning the regulations that were mentioned. The regulations do not clearly state that rent board members may present agenda reports at regular meetings. And I think it's really important that the language states that. There is no fiscal impact. On May 23rd last year, General Counsel Oshenkoa outlined the procedure for the staff, the rent board as a whole, and individual rent board members to present agenda reports at regular meetings. Would it be possible to turn to the training that our general counsel gave us, the second last page of the training, which says individual board members continue? Oh, we just went by one. Okay, here it is, individual board members. I think it's important for us as board members to understand that this is something we can do. We can raise a topic or an issue of concern, and General Counsel has given us the procedure. We contact staff members and request data if we need that to support our concern. We can request staff to provide a staff report template for us to use. We fill in the appropriate sections. We submit the completed staff report to staff. We also, as rent board members, can prepare a PowerPoint for the board. We don't have to do an agenda report. We can do a PowerPoint. Also, the staff may prepare a staff report to support our agenda or oppose it or contextualize the board member's staff report. So for example, if one of us had a concern, let's say we were concerned about hybrid meetings, and we wanted to talk about that issue more, we as board members could put forth an agenda report. The outline that we have here, coming from our general counsel, is excellent, but I would like to say that also in the agenda report, it's mentioned that on July 3rd, 2023, Executive Director Nicholas Traylor presented agenda report training. Those of us who've trained with him knows that he does an excellent job of giving that training. I was a part of that training. I think Board Member Height, you were also a member. So if a board member has a desire to put forth an agenda report, I would suggest contacting our executive director and going through his training. It was excellent. It provided everything I need to prepare my reports. One other thing is that both executive director and deputy director will offer to help you with your report. They can edit it or give you suggestions. I found that very helpful. So basically, we're asking the staff to put forth language that will allow board members to present agenda reports. I have some examples of language here, but I trust staff's language more than I trust mine. So I trust that the staff will come back with the correct language that the board can approve. The proposed timeline is this month, April, and in May, staff will come back with the proposed language to give us, to show that we can do an agenda report. And then the board will vote on the staff's language. And then if it's approved, then we will promulgate the language that that staff has come back with. But I think we should take time to discuss it. So do any board members want to say anything about presenting your own agenda report or ask about the process or any comments?
Kind of question and comment, more of a comment. I've been wondering how to do that for a while and just keep forgetting to ask. So I really appreciate you doing this, Board Member Dawkins. I'll definitely be reading it.
Yeah, as a member, as I mentioned, General Counsel's agenda report explanation is perfect, and then as you follow up with the training with Nicholas.
For sure, I
think
think we'll do that.
Okay, any other discussion of this item? Can we have a vote, Madam Chair, on the recommended action?
I think General Counsel has a question.
Yes.
If you don't mind, thank you. So I'm just trying to understand the proposed timeline. You would like, is the board going to vote tonight that we come back with amendments to the regulations, or?
Yes, in May,
And then the amendments are to,
at a regular meeting, not a special meeting. And the amendments would give in plain language, for example, agenda items may be submitted by staff, the rent board as a whole, or by individual board members. That's one example of the language. The originator of an agenda report, for example, a board member, will present a report, as we did this time when we called for staff report. It was a board member's report, so the board member would give the report. And then the rent board members may ask questions of the originator of the agenda report, of the agenda item. Other than that, I think the language is sufficient, but I trust staff to come back with appropriate language.
okay, I understand. Yes, the board is just looking for a statement that,
No, the board is looking for the regulation to state specifically, because it does not now state specifically that a board member can present an agenda item.
okay, that's what the board's looking for, that specific statement in the regs.
Yes,
Okay.
we'd like the regulations changed so that it is very clear that the rent board as a whole staff, and board members may individually present staff reports.
Got it. That's it. Thank you.
Okay. And tonight, we've discussed, can we have a vote?
Yes. Right. Okay. Yeah, how would we proceed with this, Madam Clerk? Are we doing a vote to move forward with this?
Yes, it's a vote to amend, you're saying to amend the language, right?
Yes.
Yes, so it would be a vote.
Okay.
So a motion and then a vote, right?
Would you like to?
Yes, a motion to direct staff to
Yes. ...
Okay. Would you like
I'd
to?
like to make the motion.
Okay.
You gotta turn your mic. Turn your mic, Jim, turn your, yeah.
I'd like to make a motion that we direct staff to amend Regulation 322A and B and A and C, come up with the language that Board Member Dawkins described. Does that work?
I think that works.
Okay.
Yeah. Does that language work?
There's a second?
Yes, thank you.
Do we need to add that, direct the staff to submit the amended regulation for the board's consideration and vote at the next regular meeting, May, or whenever the next regular meeting is?
Okay.
If that's what the board wants, then yes.
Yes, please. Yes. So redo everything and add that?
Yeah, you can just add it to the tail end, whoever made the motion.
Whoever
you can-
made the motion, yeah.
Yeah, if we could get this, if staff would have this ready for us by the next regular meeting.
I understand, yes, that's fine.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Board Member Espinoza?
Yes.
Okay. I'll take a vote. Board Member Dawkins?
Yes.
Board Member Espinoza?
Yes.
Board Member Height?
Yes.
And Vice Chair Guadalupe?
Yes.
Motion passes with Chair Cantor absent. Okay. Right. The next item on the agenda, we're moving to item J1 under Rent Board as a whole. Item J1 is to establish an ad hoc committee to, one, communicate with the Richmond Public Arts Committee concerning the preservation of the mural. Two, monitor the progress to recognize, restore, and preserve the Rent Program mural. And three, report back to the entire Rent Board on a quarterly basis. There is one speaker on this item, but I don't see the speaker. So, it was one speaker on this item, but I think she left.
Was that Lana?
Yes, so she's not here, but yeah. That's it.
Yes, we can begin with the photographs. I just saw them up, so if you would like to go back to the photographs of the mural. I was quite surprised. I learned from a friend recently, and it's a corner of Ohio and 23rd Street. I took the picture, so I apologize. I didn't quite get Ohio Street, but it's Ohio Street and South 23rd. How do we make the pictures move?
Sorry, and is this the
Okay.
presentation that we're going to have
That's
for this?
what,
Yeah, if I can just stop, I'm sorry, Board Member Dawkins, to interrupt, but Vice Chair, I believe Guadalupe has to call the item and ask for the the individual who's going to present, and then you begin to present your
okay.
your topic.
Okay, so it won't be a staff report, right? So it would be a board report, board member?
Well, I don't believe this, well, there is a staff report here, but, okay, so the board clerk has called the item, and then the vice chair asks if anyone's going to be presenting on the item. And then whoever identifies themselves as a presenter, you authorize to speak, because they can only speak with the authority of the chair.
Gotcha, thank you for that.
So you'll start where I said there are no speaker, there is one speaker on this item, and then you'll go from there. Where it says chair.
So thank you. We will now hear the report, right? It's not a staff report, or there is a staff report?
Not sure, but you can ask.
Do we
It
have?
is a staff report on, it's agenda report. I don't know if that's the same, but she will be presenting.
You can just, you can ask if there is a staff report or a presenter on the item.
Okay, thank you. Is there a staff report or a presenter on this item?
The subject of the report is the existence of the Rent Program Public Art Mural at Ohio Street and South 23rd. The mural depicts portions of the language from our rent program and describes various housing situations. Next slide, please. So there we can see a typical housing situation. A single mother with a child and community discussions about housing. And you can see some of the language, if we have the next slide, but even in this slide, you can see that some of the language is faded. And that is one of the things we're concerned with, is restoring this beautiful mural. Next slide, please. Okay, next slide. I'm sorry about my picture-taking ability. There are some slides that show who worked on the mural. It's gray. Can you see that slide? Okay, it's a different set. It's, the slide I'm referring to is in the agenda packet. Yeah, so if you'll, yes, okay, there you can see that's one of the housing situations that we have here in Richmond. If you could go to the next slide, please. And again, someone sleeping who's homeless. On the next slide. Please keep going. A family with no housing. Yeah, and this is showing the lettering that's faded. Next slide, please. And you can see some of the panels are in Spanish, which I think is very appropriate. Next slide, please. Yes, at the bottom of this slide, it tells you that the mural created through the Staying Power, it's a fellowship of ACE, RISE, R-Y-S-E, helped to create the mural Safe Return Project, and the Haas Institute for a Fair and Inclusive Society, thanks to the many Richmond residents who helped create the mural. So it wasn't only these organizations, it was also Richmond residents who helped to create this mural. And the purpose of this agenda report is to form an ad hoc committee. And in consultation with our general counsel, we learned that our rent board can create an ad hoc committee. It can consist of no more than 2 members, and that keeps it within the purview of the Brown Act, because an ad hoc committee can make no decisions. The committee can either be appointed by the chair on behalf of the entire board, or chosen by a vote of the entire board. The ad hoc committee will seek advice from our executive director regarding any correspondence or agreements that we make with the, and I think that's the community Public Arts, no, the Committee on Public Arts. The committee, the ad hoc committee, will make quarterly reports to the rent board at regular meetings, not special meetings, describing any progress to date, with the first report due 1 month after establishment, and then quarterly thereafter. The RACC, the Richmond Arts Community Council, I think, I'm not sure. But, and then the Public Arts Committee. They meet twice a month. If you could scroll further, please. And I've included one of their agenda. We were thinking maybe, well, first of all, I'd like to ask members of the board, is anyone, I would like to serve on the committee. We need 2 members. Is anybody else interested in serving on the ad hoc committee?
I'd be interested.
Okay, so we have 2 members, and I think that requires a vote by the entire board to accept the 2 members who volunteered to be on the ad hoc committee. And again, the proposed timeline, we'll make some kind of contact with the Public Art, Committee on Public Art, with the advice of our executive director. I feel, and I'm not sure how you feel, Board Member Height, that in contacting another committee, we get advice on how to do that best. But we should have something started, so the first report to the board will be done on May 24th, regular meeting, and then quarterly thereafter. Ad hoc committees don't last forever. We're not a standing committee, so we will disband the ad hoc committee with a final report at our March 26th regular meeting, or when the ad hoc committee members determine the purpose has been achieved. And the note is, it's anticipated that the city of Richmond will host a 10-year commemoration of the signing of the ordinance in February 2026. So the reasoning for, there's been some talk for some members of the RPA and other people that our ordinance was signed in February of 2026. That's just 2 years away. And that maybe there should be some kind of citywide celebration, commemoration, something to recognize this marvelous agency and the ordinance that the people brought forth on an initiative. So I'm thinking that the ad hoc committee could really do a good job in getting our rent board mural restored, preserved, whatever, that we should be able to complete that in time for the big celebration in February 2026. Of course, that's just a pipe dream of mine. But anyway, I'm giving the committee, ad hoc committee, 2 years to do its job and then to disband. Board Member Height, how do you feel about it?
Well, the existing mural it's really contentious, you know. I think it's right that we work to bring it back and restore it. But I think the mural, well, we can just talk about this. I think all of us have to think about how we should, I think we should make a new mural that represents the objectives of rent control and put them, I think we should have 2 or 3 of them around different parts of the city, but I think we should be real sure about what the message is we want to say, and we've got to inform the public, you know, about all this.
Yes, well,
I actually had a question as well.
Executive Director?
Yeah, thank you, Board Member Dawkins. I think before we make any decisions on this matter, we should consult with the General Counsel to see what the limitations are in terms of what we can and cannot do around this. As you know, there are pretty strict requirements around how the fees are used, landlord fees, or landlord paid fees. And we just want to make sure that we hear his feedback before making any decisions.
Oh, yes, this meeting right now, we're not making any decisions except that we would like to have the board vote on the two members that have volunteered for the ad hoc committee. And I'm just wanting to know, does the board wish to discuss further the existence of this ad hoc committee or the purpose?
Yes, I actually had just a question. I'm a little confused as to what the purpose would be in terms of the rent board work that we're doing with the community itself, and two, how would this be different than, just a resident volunteering with the art commission folks to do that? Like, how will the rent board be involved with this committee?
My initial thought was that the rent board would present or talk with the public arts people and let them know that the rent board, that there is a mural depicting our program and that we're interested in having it restored. And then the conversation would follow based upon the guidelines from our executive director and general counsel. But basically, and I think Board Member Height was also mentioning about the source of funds. We would expect that to be a part of the discussion down the way. But my assumption was that the Public Arts Committee has a source of funds, but that's...
I have a quick question for the general counsel. Would there be any concerns around an ad hoc committee going before the Arts Committee with a recommendation that the board has recommended that the Arts Commission put some funds into the restoration? Is there any issues around that?
Excuse me, maybe we shouldn't even mention funds. I was just thinking that we would go and say, the rent board has a mural existing. We see that it's deteriorating. We were wondering if the Public Arts Committee could think about restoring that.
Mm-hmm. And just to be clear, we want to make sure it's, this is a mural that wasn't originally funded by the rent program or the rent board. It was a community effort. So I just want to make sure we're clear that it's not our mural per se, although it clearly expresses and advocates the ordinance or for the ordinance. So we just have to, be clear about that, that's all.
What do you think?
I think general counsel has
Oh, I'm sorry.
a question.
You wanted an answer to your question, right?
Yes, please.
Yes, so, as formed, there's probably some issues with the ad hoc committee. It cannot obviously be a standing committee. That means a committee that's just there for perpetuity. If the committee's purpose is as expressed, then the committee would have reached its purpose as soon as it spoke with the Arts Commission. And then it would immediately be disbanded after reporting back as to what the Arts Commission had said. But even before you get there, our primary function is to regulate rents. That's what the courts have said. And any activity we do must be that. And this particular activity appears to exceed that scope. So don't think you could form a committee that would perform that function.
Okay, let me think specifically. You're saying you do not think that we can create an ad hoc committee to go to the public art people and suggest that our mural is deteriorating, can you restore it? That's
I think that function does not relate to the rent board's regulatory purpose of setting rents and monitoring evictions.
I see, okay.
May I speak? Would it be within our purview to create a mural that would describe what we do? This would be more of an outreach, where we could create a mural, a new mural, that would describe what we do and be functional to reach different people in the city.
The board would have to find, under the ordinance, in order to spend money, whether that be actual money or staff time, your spending has to be both reasonable and necessary, all right? And the reasonableness is the easy one to define. The costs have to be reasonable. But the necessary is the one where the courts are really strict on. And necessary means that without doing this thing, your functions would be significantly impaired. So the board would have to determine, without this mural, would their outreach functions be significantly impaired? Whether or not you can make that determination, I don't know. And I wouldn't tell you in public anyways. I'd probably write some confidential memorandum, unless it was absolutely clear that you could not. So to answer your question, the board would have to tackle with whether or not that is necessary, that mural, for you to perform your function of outreach.
I'm not talking about that mural now.
No, I'm saying
Okay.
generally, and that analysis happens on every line item that you do. Salaries, postcards, everything. Everything has to be necessary. Not all outreach qualifies as permissible.
Can I make a quick comment? I do know that it's common for other jurisdictions to either have ad hoc committees around outreach and community education, or some, in the case of Berkeley, they have like standing committees, which are costly and time-consuming, what have you. But if you have a an ad hoc committee that addresses the comprehensive outreach plan and looks at all of the different parameters, and the board can, that ad hoc committee can go back to the board and say, we've been talking about all these various outreach activities and services, and we recommend X, Y, or Z because of the following reasons. And of course, in doing that, it's our job as staff to make sure that there's a strong enough nexus between the idea or the outreach activity and our purpose of, making sure community members are aware of specific parts of the law, or that they know when the rent increase is going to be allowed, or certain things like that.
So you were saying we could have an ad hoc committee that would, let's say, for example, do community outreach?
Well, the ad hoc committee, the purpose of an ad hoc committee isn't to actually do the outreach, because that's the staff's job. It's to make recommendations to the board as a whole on various activities. We've been looking at the stats, and the stats say we need more resources here, or we need less there. And because of that, we want to shift priorities, or we want to invest in a creative outreach idea, that kind of thing.
Okay, that's good, that's clear. So it seems that it's clear that the rent board can establish ad hoc committees and ad hoc committee or committees that fit within the purpose here. Okay, so do we need to establish that in any way or not? That if the board wanted to create an ad hoc committee, subject to be determined within the purview of our program, that we can do that.
So yes, typically, if the board has a suggestion, like tonight, the board would if the board member has a suggestion like you do tonight, the board would consider that suggestion and then vote to direct staff to do the legal research to figure out the parameters of that suggestion, whether or not it's viable. And then staff would do the research, come back the following board meeting and say, you know, either it doesn't work or it does work, or it works, but you have to carve out some part of it because it's in violation of the regulatory purpose. And even then, prior to that, the subsequent meeting, staff would likely reach out to the sponsor of the item and talk to them about their legal research findings and let them know what the findings are. But ultimately, staff would come back here and say, yes, it would work, but your parameters are here, so you need to shave off this part and do that part. I hope that answers your question.
Oh, it did. I would like to ask another question. So it looks as if it is not within the purview of the rent board to create an ad hoc committee to concern itself with the preservation and restoration of the mural on 23rd and Ohio Streets. So my question is, as an individual rent board member who is interested in seeing that that mural is preserved, what would be an approach so that it would be, you know, within our purview but what would be the best way to bring it to the attention of the public arts people?
So I would have to think on that and return later for an answer to you, and likely privately, so I don't give away any legal attorney-client privilege. But just generally, without even speaking about legal issues, a board member, any board member, can go to any other board meeting as an individual and say, you know, I'm really into this mural. I think it's important for the community, and advocate as a citizen or a resident of Richmond to get those things done.
Okay, so if I go to the Public Arts Committee at its next meeting and say, I, Elaine Dawkins, can I also include member of the rent board or not?
No, you cannot, because the board speaks as a whole and not as an individual. And that's a good point. If anyone goes out and speaks, they cannot speak on behalf of the board unless authorized to do so by the entire board. So if you went to the meeting, you'd just be speaking as an individual. Some people might know you as a board member, and that's okay, but you yourself can't say I'm a board member, because then that gives off an air that you're speaking for the board.
Okay. So, you know, because I think some people do know that I'm a member of the board, so if I don't mention it, they may mention it. But then I would have to say, I'm only speaking as an individual, not for the rent board.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else on the board have any comments or questions or?
No, I think with Nicholas and Charles really helped clear that up, so I really appreciate that. I have no further questions.
Well, I would still like to pursue thinking about an ad hoc committee to design a mural, because I think that might be a really good outreach idea. Not the mural that you know, the cool one, but just come up with something new that would reach people, because I think murals do reach people in this town. So can we ask staff to look, so at this point, we would need to ask staff to look into creating an ad hoc committee, or the possibility of creating an ad hoc committee for outreach regarding a public mural, or a series of public mural, possible to just delve into the notion of it.
So there's two ways you can go about it. The rent board can direct staff to look into the possibility of doing that, and then staff will do that, and I will do a legal analysis on whatever staff finds. Or an individual board member, any one of you, can contact staff and say, hey, I'm thinking about bringing this item back to the next meeting. Can you do some legal research on it? And sometimes we can, sometimes we can't. So up to you. all to proceed how you like. So again, the first option is the entire board votes to direct staff to look into the possibility of doing murals. The second option is the board doesn't take any vote, and an individual board member contacts staff and says, hey, I want to present this item to the board, but before I present it, I want to know if it's possible. Can you tell me if it's possible? And then staff will talk to that individual board member and let them know the legal parameters. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I think the former would be more practical, where we just do it as individuals rather than tie up more time with the board. So we would just, we can still talk about, two board members can talk about it, right, legally?
Yes, but you have to make absolutely sure that only 2 board members are speaking about it. Yeah, I wouldn't speak to anyone else, and let the other person know not to speak to anyone else.
I'd like to clarify one point that the executive director mentioned, if I heard you correctly, that board members don't do outreach, that's for staff to do?
Yeah, so generally, the job of staff is to manage, and the job of the board is to govern. So in other words, we would go out, we do the outreach. Of course, any individual member of the board can go speak to the public and say, hey, we have this program, we have a rent board, come to the board meeting, visit the rent program. You can always advocate and inform the public individually. But in terms of assigning board members to do work that would otherwise be done with staff, by staff, I don't think that's appropriate, because that's generally not the role of board members.
It's just that I remember our first meeting last year or something, there was quite an excitement about outreach to different communities. And I think some of us got the idea that board members were going to be a part of that. I had decided that I couldn't go door to door knocking. Those days are over. And a few other choice outreach things are over for me personally. But I would like to challenge the staff to perhaps think of some outreach that board members can do that wouldn't step on the toes of staff and yet give us a feeling that we are supporting our program.
I understand. I do know, and maybe the general counsel will correct me on this, but in the past, board members have attended special events, outreach events, and attended those events and said, hello, I'm a board member, come to the rent board, check us out. But that was the limit of it usually is, being there at events or that type of thing. But I don't know. Correct me if I'm wrong. I could be wrong.
No, you're right. I just want to clarify one point. In those scenarios that Mr. Trailer pointed out, the board members, I hope, were not mentioning that they were board members. Again, when you go out to the public as individuals, you're just who you are, unless the board has authorized you to be the board. That's one of the layers why board members don't do the outreach, because they're not the board, they're individuals when they're out there speaking. And then again, ad hoc committees, as Mr. Trailer described, function of the ad hoc committee is to gather information, not to perform a duty of an employee. You gather information, and then you present it back to the board. You're gathering for policy development purposes. One of the main functions of a board is to establish policies, rules, and regulations. And the main function of staff is to execute on your policies, rules, regulations, and goal. And that's why the tasks of staff look vastly different than tasks of board members. But as individuals, of course, you can go out and do what you're passionate about as an individual.
I'd like to make a motion.
I just have one more question. I know that it seems like as a board, we're really interested about outreach efforts. in general. And I know in previous board meetings, I had asked about the, any creative outreaching ideas, so I would love to hear, maybe next meeting or whenever y'all can get that data, how is that going and what creative outreach solutions you guys have thought of?
Great, thank you, Vice Chair Guadalupe. I just want to say we are going to be, as part of the budget process, discussing some of those issues and presenting what we're doing activity-wise. So we'll get to that.
Good to hear. Thank you for that. Okay. And then, let's see. I know Board Member Dawkins wants to make a motion, so do we just?
I would like the board to assist me in crafting a motion. What I would like to do is to have a motion that states that the board votes to approve the creation of ad hoc committees for our board, subjects to be determined in cooperation with staff and general counsel. In other words, establish by vote that we allow ourselves to have ad hoc committees consisting of no more than 2 members, and that we consult with staff and the general counsel about the subject of our ad hoc committee, but that we as a board can establish and function, have ad hoc committees that function. How does that set with the rest of the board?
So if I'm hearing this correctly, you just want that language to be said that we are able to.
Yeah, that we're able to do it, that we're able to establish ad hoc committees in conjunction with the executive director and general counsel of the purpose of the ad hoc committee, but that we can do this with 2 members.
Is that necessary, since I believe you guys said we are able to, right?
State law gives you the right. It's not necessary. You already have that right, and I can't take it away, and the board couldn't take it away. It's part of the functions of any governing body. It's just that when you exercise that right, it has to fall into certain requirements in order for it to be a functional body or committee. Does that make sense?
Thank you for that. We got some clarification. Appreciate that.
Was that a motion? I'm just trying to understand. Was it a motion or you were just drafting it? Because I didn't hear you say. Was it a motion or just, it was just?
I've withdrawn the motion.
Oh, that was a motion. Okay, I didn't know that was a motion.
I withdraw
considering.
intention to make a motion.
Okay, so that was, so was it a motion or not, so I can know? Okay, it wasn't a motion, okay. Thank you.
Okay, I think that's it for item J.
I'm sorry, Chair, if I may, or Vice Chair. I think Board Member Hyatt wanted to make a motion about staff determining whether or not murals were okay or something like this.
If I made a motion, I withdraw that as well. We'll just do this individually and why waste everybody's time? We'll figure out something cool and come back.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so there's no speakers. The speaker that was here, she's not here. So what do we do with this item? There was no,
Yeah, there's no action on the item, so you
so
can.
it was just received and no action?
Well, if the Vice Chair determines that there's no further discussion or action, you can proceed.
So I have to say that?
Yeah.
Okay.
I just need to know what to do with it.
Gotcha. So there's no further action needed for this item.
Gotcha.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just need to know how to proceed.
Solamente tenía que saber cómo proceder.
That's for item, the next one? Okay, now we're moving to item K1, under budget. Item K1 is to receive a presentation regarding the rent program budget timeline and requirements for the fiscal year 2024 through 2025 rent program operating budget. This item was continued from the April 9th, 2024 special rent board meeting. There's one speaker on this item, Ms. Alana Clark, but she is not present. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now hear the staff report.
Thank you. I would like to ask the board to give me 60 seconds to use the restroom so that I'm not rushing through this. I've been drinking water throughout the whole meeting, and I need to use the restroom real quick. Is that okay? I'll be right.
Do we need a motion to take a break?
Do they need to take a break, vote for that, or?
Yeah, can we just
Okay.
call in 5
I'm
minutes?
really
10-minute
sorry.
break for everybody.
I was going to do it, I just, nobody else wanted to.
Oh, I do.
How do we do?
Can I make a motion for a break?
I second the motion.
You have to, you have to,
How
wait,
long?
Wait,
For how
hold
long?
on. Let's do it again. Hold on.
you have to state the amount of time.
Right.
I'd like to propose a motion, take a 5-minute break at this time.
Okay,
I second the motion.
got it.
Can we take a
Okay.
vote?
So let's take a vote that we will return at, what, 7:40? Okay, so I'll take a vote. Board Member Dawkins?
Yes.
Board Member Espinoza?
Yes.
Board Member Height?
Yes.
And Vice Chair Guadalupe?
Yes.
Okay, motion passes with Chair Cantor absent, that we will, we'll recess for a break and return at 7:40.
My God. I
That's why I said. Okay,
I was for no talking. Wow.
So I have a whole list of things I'm gonna make sure I have for you.
The only day that I can come is Wednesday.
Okay, only
Because
Wednesday.
they call me on Tuesday I work at 4. So now I know that coming Wednesday, I only can stay in San Francisco. I cannot take another day.
Okay, so
Because I
only
was,
Wednesdays.
yes, because the other days I'm done at 4:15. I'm
That was
never
what I was
gonna
gonna ask you. Okay,
I
so.
will never gonna be here,
I thought you said that before, so these are all the meetings that have, these are all
yes,
Tuesdays.
there's one Tuesday. That's why I say no to all these ones, because they're already traveling.
I know, I tried to, but I won't. Okay, so you can do this one.
May 15, yes.
That's a Wednesday.
Yes.
So all the ones that doesn't have like the little asterisk next to it are Wednesdays. Those are regular meetings for every third Wednesday. But you can do, so if I can find another meeting date, if I can,
Okay.
like let's say if I can get this on a Wednesday, could you? If it's in April, if I can get it on.
But June I can do it. June, July, I can do any day because I'm on vacation. I only work in
Gotcha. So June 11th you could do?
Yes, June 11.
That's a Tuesday.
And June 19, and
Okay.
July 17.
Okay.
After here, I go back to school.
You go back to school.
I'm teaching now.
But are you gonna do, can you do it from this point on? Or no? On Wednesday, okay.
Because I'm done in school at 2:30.
Okay, so you said you could do,
And
you
my
could do
next
July.
is we just.
You know, okay, so you could do July, right? You could do June, right?
Exactly.
And you could do June 11th.
And May 15, what is it? What day?
That's the Wednesday.
Yeah, I can
So
do
you
that.
can do that.
All June, July, I can do it.
So right now, these dates are not open in the system because we have to renew the contract at that time, okay? So don't even worry about that part right now, because but it's just May 15th. Now, you're saying you can't do
No,
these two, the 29th and the May 7th,
because they're cheap.
because they're Tuesdays. Got you, okay, cannot. Okay, so I'm gonna try,
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm
it's
sorry.
okay,
I'm sorry to say, oh my God, I'm gonna feel bad.
it's okay.
Well, when I don't come, someone comes?
No. What happened, oh, you didn't hear what happened last Tuesday?
No, because I
I
told
had to
them.
cancel the meeting at the meeting.
No, but I told them, I can't go.
Yeah,
Tuesday.
I
say
know. No, but it wasn't you, it was somebody else named, somebody else. It wasn't you.
Oh,
It was just they had assigned it to somebody else, and I had to cancel at the meeting. So it wasn't you. I knew you would
that
do
was,
me like
they
that.
were calling me today.
Because you scared me. Because
No,
I
no,
knew
no.
you wouldn't do me like that.
But I text them, oh my
No, last week, no.
And I told her, like, the meeting started at 5, so I can't still make it late, but I
So
can.
Tomasa, that was not her last week. It was
No,
somebody
no,
else. It wasn't
no.
her that canceled last week. It was
No, that
somebody
wasn't
else.
me.
That
Because I
wasn't
was
her.
clear to the company that I can't come, the only thing I can come is some water.
Yeah, so it wasn't her. It was somebody else.
I was late.
Yeah, she can't, she normally comes. It's just that she only can come on a Wednesday.
I said, oh, no, we know what to do.
I know, but it's not, you know, it's good for other things, but if we have a good one, we have a good one, it's just, you know.
But if we don't have a good plan,
Yeah. Oh, Lord, okay.
now I used to. The first time that I came, I was so scared to do simultaneous because I always do medicals. Yeah.
Well, now you kind of got it a little bit, how we do things, but I know now. Oh, goodness gracious. But you had to work, girl. I'm doing work. 2 weeks in a while, that was, I couldn't do 2 weeks. The last week, it was crazy.
No, but I was coming to a meeting and the meeting was canceled.
Which one? The one, yeah, on the third, on the March, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, but that was because we didn't have enough board members. That's what it was. Yeah.
Okay, because I was coming and they canceled me.
Yeah, because we didn't have enough board members. When it's not a.
I canceled the last minute.
Yeah, her husband was sick.
Has surgery?
Yeah.
She's not very good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's what happens. Sometimes that may happen.
It's an emergency.
Oh, goodness gracious. What the heck?
So we want to talk about the budget that ustedes necesitan aprobar en octubre.
No, antes de octubre. Lo que estoy diciendo es que no le puedes decir afuera porque es una junta cerrada.
Pues parece que viene fuera de mí, hablar del budget.
Ya, el valle sí sabe aquí, pero que hablamos allá, ¿no?
Ya.
Ujú. Ya, pero no.
I'm going. All right, let's do it. What time do you start?
9:30 till 9:45.
Really?
Yeah, it's in my class.
You have a class tonight?
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow, from 12 for 12 hours. 9:30 in the morning, 9:45.
Yeah, it's like one class and I work on campus and then have another class, and another class, and another class.
Wow.
Yeah, it's like a night.
You must be ready to graduate, huh?
So already, I'm like, oh,
Are you in, you live in Richmond?
tell me I'm not.
Oh, so you have to drive too? From here? I mean, not that far, but it's far enough. Like 25 minutes maybe?
Like right now, when I go home, it'll be like 20 plus 25 minutes.
Yeah.
I think on Monday,
Oh, yeah, there's a protest. Yeah.
and I'm working.
Reasonable hours to get home.
Yeah, it's good.
Okay, so we're not everybody to get back.
¿Cómo es? No es esto.
Okay, I'm going to call the meeting to order from recess at 7:42. Is everybody back? Yeah, everybody's back. 7:42.
Vamos a empezar el nuevo meeting a las
17:42. ¿Me escuchan, no?
Oh, my bad. Okay. Okay. Thank you. So we will resume and now hear the staff report.
Good evening, Vice Chair Guadalupe and members of the Rent Board, Nicholas Traylor, Executive Director. I'll be presenting a high-level overview of the budget process timeline, requirements, and initial staff goals and recommendations.
Con todas las recomendaciones que ha hecho el staff.
The issue before us today is the requirement to adopt the rent program budget and corresponding rental housing fee. Towards that end, in accordance with Section 11.100.060L of the Richmond Fair Rent Just Cause for Eviction and Homeowner Protection Ordinance, the amount of the residential rental housing fee will be determined by the City Council after a recommendation by the Board. Prior to July 1st, the Board is required to hold a public hearing on a proposed budget and adopt an annual budget for the ensuing fiscal year. To that end, staff members have prepared a presentation overviewing budget requirements and the budget process/timeline for the Board's consideration and comment. Staff will also present their initial budget recommendations for the Board's input, feedback, and direction. There is no fiscal impact related to this item.
No hay un impacto fiscal relacionado con este item.
The budget process requires a process and a timeline. This process and timeline are designed to keep the board and staff in line with the requirements to adopt a budget prior to the end of the fiscal year. The process and timeline almost always changes and is subject to change in cases where a meeting is canceled or a special meeting is necessary. The process of developing a budget generally begins in January with pre-budget discussions between the executive director, deputy director, and all rent program staff. In those discussions, the needs of each unit and the agency are assessed. Those needs primarily include staffing needs, as well as non-staff resources such as translation and interpretation services, outreach materials, and mass mailings, among others. Between February and March, staff review and prepare program statistics, such as the number of petitions filed, number of hearings held, number of counseling sessions conducted, number of legal service referrals, compliance numbers, and other pertinent statistics. Originally, the board was scheduled to receive this presentation at the February 27th regular board meeting, but due to the cancellation of several board meetings, the board is now receiving that presentation today. Assuming there are no further board meetings canceled, the board is scheduled to review the first draft budget and associated budget options at a special meeting on April 29th and/or May 7th. And I say and/or depending on if we can have a quorum. After receiving feedback and direction from the board at the April 17th meeting, the board is scheduled again to meet on either April 29th or May 7th to review the second draft budget and provide any additional feedback and direction. At the May 15th regular board meeting, staff intend to present the final draft budget for tentative approval. To meet the 10-day public noticing requirement, the board is scheduled to receive the budget and fee study for final approval on June 11th. Prior to July 1st, staff intend to go before the City Council for approval of the rental housing fee necessary to fund the budget and the agency. Finally, as soon as June 12th, staff will notify the Finance Department of the adopted fee for inclusion of the city's master fee schedule and begin the billing and invoicing process. Next slide, please. So the first budget principle for a regulatory agency such as the rent program is that all budgeted items be necessary to effectuate the purpose of the rent ordinance and enable the rent program to fulfill its mission at a reasonable cost. I know you've heard this statement said before, but all items budgeted must be necessary to effectuate the purpose of the ordinance and reasonable in cost. Next slide. Now, the rent program's budget is best described as a program-based line item budget. Program-based line item budgeting is based on first establishing agency goals and objectives, and then developing programs or activities to effectuate those goals. Line items to fund those programs and activities are designed to keep spending within the limits set by the governing body. Next slide. So when we talk about necessary and reasonable, it's always important to go back to the purpose of the rent ordinance and the mission of the rent program. So the goals of the rent program, which steer our agency and its spending priorities, are grounded by the purpose of the rent ordinance and the mission of the rent program. The purpose of the rent ordinance is to promote neighborhood and community stability, healthy housing, and affordability for renters in the city of Richmond by controlling excessive rent increases and arbitrary evictions to the greatest extent allowable under California law, while ensuring landlords a fair and reasonable return on their investment and protecting homeowners. Similarly, the mission of the rent program is to promote neighborhood and community stability, healthy housing, and affordability for Richmond tenants through the regulating of those landlord-tenant matters that reasonably relate to rents and evictions, while maintaining a landlord's right to a fair return. So, regulating rents and evictions and providing recourse for a fair return requires key agency programs or activities. And one of the most important, if not the most important activity, is funding the agency. To fund the agency, you have to be able to collect rental housing fees. To collect rental housing fees, you have to have accurate rental housing data. The ability to regulate rents and evictions and enforce the rent ordinance is also tied to educating community members on their rights and responsibilities. Enforcement of rent regulation and recourse against rent overcharges, reduced housing services, and decreased habitability is effectuated through the rent adjustment petition process. The rent adjustment petition process also provides recourse for landlords to receive their constitutional right to a fair return. Finally, enforcement of the rent ordinance relies on staff and the board working together to develop rent board policies that further work to effectuate the purpose of the rent ordinance and that provide enough support for board members to properly engage in policy development. Now, during the first 5 or so years of the rent program and the rent board, most of the energy and focus was on building the foundations of the organization and staying financially stable and sustainable. As is the case in sister jurisdictions, rent programs and rent boards mature, it's common to pivot from building the agency to focusing more on policy development. Now, this is often achieved through the establishment of rent board committees or ad hoc committees. For example, in many cities, there are outreach and education committees, there are budget and personnel committees, and these committees allow the board and staff to work closely together to discuss, evaluate, and approve various policies associated with the regulation of rents and evictions. And in some cases, bring those policy recommendations to the City Council for possible adoption. Now, when we talk about our budget or any governmental budget, it's important for the board and the public to understand that the vast majority of most governmental agency budgets are devoted to staffing slash salaries. Now, approximately 85% of the rent program's activities and services are funded through salaries and fringe benefits. The other 15% is for contracts, supplies and materials, office expenses, supplemental insurance, the rent for our office upstairs, advertising and promotion, general liability and workers' comp, administrative expenses, and professional services. Next slide, please. To properly fund the key activities mentioned in the previous slide, the rent program bills and collects rental housing fees paid by Richmond landlords. Now, having accurate rental housing data is necessary to successfully collect the fees to fund the agency. While collection of the rental housing fee has increased overall since 2017, during the last 2 fiscal years, mainly due to the financial impacts of the pandemic, it has become more challenging to collect the rental housing fee, with the number of outstanding fees owed growing to 2,900 rental units. Additionally, there's been a growing backlog of late fee waiver requests, now totaling 147 requests. Finally, because Richmond has a high number of single-family homes, condos, and duplexes which are rented and which go in and out of the rental market, often for owner occupancy, sale of owner occupancy, there has been a growing demand for what is known as administrative determinations. And those determinations are to establish whether the unit is exempt or whether the ordinance applies to that unit. Now, most determinations require extensive staff work and time, and we have a sizable backlog of 172 pending requests. Billing and registration staff do an amazing job, and their work over the years has significantly contributed to the program completing each fiscal year in the black. However, additional resources are needed to focus on collection of the rental housing fee and to allow staff to clear the backlogs I mentioned. Next slide. Another key activity required by the rent ordinance and key to the enforcement of the rent ordinance is outreach and community education. One of last year's budget priorities was to continue to develop and implement the program's comprehensive outreach plan. Included in the plan is more engagement with the community, as well as developing creative outreach activities to reach more Richmond tenants and landlords. As public information staff, usually our housing counselors, have pivoted from remote counseling to in-person counseling and engagement, there has been an uptick in demand for counseling services. Compared to last fiscal year, there's been an 11% increase in counseling sessions, a 37% increase in Spanish-speaking counseling sessions, a 39% increase in mediations, and a 57% increase in tenants who received legal service referrals. During the pandemic, there was a sharp increase in compliance-related outreach. For example, courtesy compliance letters sent out to inform landlords and tenants about the new pandemic-related rules. In fiscal year 2023-24, this trend continued with courtesy compliance letters increasing modestly by 3.5%. Additionally, there was a 57% increase in rent increase notices filed and a 34.5% increase in notices of termination of tenancy filed compared to last fiscal year. In 2022-23, we held 8 workshops that were done both in English and Spanish and are on our website. And in 23-24, staff have already held 5 workshops, again, both in Spanish and English. And over the calendar year, we intend and are scheduled to conduct a total of 12 workshops. As you all know, due to emergency orders in 2022-23, no in-person community events were attended. With the lifting of all restrictions in 2023, staff have attended 3 community events, including a presentation to the East Bay Rental Housing Association, tabling on Fridays at the Farmers Market, and attending the Sisters of Solidarity event. We are also planning on attending the Cinco de Mayo event coming up soon. Mass mailings that we do include the landlord annual billing packet, which includes important FAQs for landlords, the annual general adjustment or allowable rent increase postcard, and the guide to rent control, which is scheduled to go out to all Richmond tenants and landlords by the end of this fiscal year. Finally, as at least 40% of the community of renters are Spanish-speaking, and to allow for bilingual board meetings, the board increased the interpretation and translation budget by 134%. Staff, however, recommend the board consider further increasing the budget for interpretation and translations to secure an additional interpretation service that would specialize in-person interpretation services. And this would be achieved through a request for proposals that would have to be approved by the board. Next slide. Activity related to the rent adjustment petition process, hearings and appeals has increased significantly this fiscal year, with tenant petitions increasing by 388%, relocation petitions increasing by 275%, and appeals to the rent board growing by 50% compared to last fiscal year. Landlord petitions have decreased. However, it's important to note that in the previous fiscal year, one landlord filed 10 separate fair return petitions compared to 7 separate landlords filing petitions in 2023. Next slide. Before going into some of the preliminary recommendations by staff, it's important to review last year's budget priorities. One of the priorities was to enhance community outreach through the development and implementation of the program's comprehensive outreach plan. Our staff in the Public Information Unit have developed this comprehensive outreach plan, and some of the new and ongoing activities are being implemented. In addition to that, the board approved the addition of 2 office specialists to support office assistants to support the Public Information and Enrollment Unit, as well as hearings. This hiring was delayed until recently because these positions had to go before the City Council for approval because they hadn't been in the city's classification list for many years, as well as the fact that the applicants had to go through an extensive city exam because it was an entry-level position. Staff are in the recruitment process, and we have recently hired 1 office assistant, and we are still recruiting for the second one. Another key priority was to enhance translation and interpretation services. Despite our increase in funding for in-person interpretation services for fiscal year 2023-24, the reliability of the in-person interpretation has been inconsistent, resulting in cancellation of several board meetings. Staff recommend the board consider budgeting for additional interpretation services that specialize in in-person interpretation for board meetings. And finally, due to the significant increase in petitions filed, hearings, and appeals held, staff recommend increasing funding for translation of associated documents and recordings. Next slide, thank you. So I think it's important for the board to kind of get a good idea about how the whole budget process starts. And it's an internal process that starts with the executive director and the deputy director meeting with each rent program staff person, usually starting with program or unit supervisors, to discuss and assess the program's needs. So we ask staff to prepare and review program statistics so that we can assess the needs and to support any related recommendations. Now, staff then bring those recommendations to the board for their feedback, input, and direction. Next slide. So to facilitate feedback, input, and direction from the board, staff from each of the agency's unit will provide the board with a presentation on its activities, priorities, and recommendations for fiscal year 2024-25. These recommendations will include the financial impact of those recommendations. So based on program needs communicated to executive staff that are backed by supporting data and trends, staff have communicated the following recommendations for the fiscal year 2024-25 budget. First, in the management unit, which is the unit that oversees board-related matters, staff recommend increasing resources for in-person interpretation at board meetings to find a more reliable in-person interpretation vendor. Now, we do have an existing vendor, as you know. They've done a great job with our hearings unit, but we've had issues with board meetings. In the public information and enrollment unit, staff recommend the board consider increasing compliance staff resources to increase collection and compliance. This additional compliance staff would focus primarily on collection of delinquent fees, discovering new rental properties, and investigating and determining the status of suspected or claimed units that have been claimed exempt or inapplicable. Additionally, staff recommend that resources also focus on continued development of the comprehensive outreach plan, as well as conducting at least 2 mass outreach or mass mailings to all tenants and landlords, a project which was hampered due to the remote work associated with the pandemic. Now, due to the high number of petitions, the significant increase of 388%, staff recommend the board consider additional journey-level clerical resources to address the dramatic rise in petitions, hearings, and appeals. Finally, it is important to note that as hearings activity increases, as has been the case, so does the need for counseling services, because our counselors are there to assist landlords and tenants, walk them through the whole petition process. Next slide. So the recommended action tonight is to receive a presentation regarding the rent program budget and timeline and requirements for the fiscal year 2024-25 rent program operating budget. And staff seek the board's input, feedback on the initial budget recommendations, and are happy to answer questions the board may have related to this item. And with that, we're happy to take questions.
Thank you for that presentation. Are there any questions from members of the board?
Yeah, I was just curious on the engagement and community events. There's 3 events that are tabled weekly? Or is it one event?
One event is tabled weekly, or almost every week, depending on staffing. The others are one-time events.
And it's just,
Sorry, board member, if you don't mind, the microphone, turning your microphone on.
sorry,
No, no
thank
worries.
you.
Yes, thank you.
Blimey. Who does the staffing at the event?
Usually our housing counselors, our rent program services analysts. We also have billing and registration staff there as well, for example.
Is that overtime?
In some cases, it's overtime. Some cases, it's what's called comp time. You can choose between the two if you want.
Right, okay. I'm just curious. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Cuando también hablan de la divulgación a la comunidad, desde el año pasado yo les pedí que si por favor me pedían decir cuál era su plan de alcanzar a la comunidad de otras maneras, no solamente yendo a mesas y solo presentándose en algunos eventos. ¿Qué otra cosa podrían hacer?
Oh, since the last year that I joined the board, I was asking like, what is the way that you are approaching to the community, and just not to go to different tables. So what is the plan that you guys are having, or what are the plan that you are thinking to have to approach to the community?
Our staff will be presenting that plan as part of their budget presentation. I don't want to go into all of the details right now, but essentially, part of that plan includes engagement with various community organizations, nonprofits, businesses, churches, and other associations to make sure that they know they have a connection with us and that they can give you a good example of one that we established in the recent, I say in the last couple of fiscal years. There's a nonprofit called Lifelong Healthcare, I believe. They have a facility here in Richmond, a hospital here in Richmond, and we established a connection with them. Our staff spoke with their key staff who work with the public. At any time a tenant comes in saying, I'm suffering from mold issues or health issues associated with mold or other issues associated with habitability problems, they contact us and give us that person's information, and we contact that tenant. So that's an example of one of the activities that we have included in the comprehensive outreach plan. But I think it would be more appropriate for our unit supervisor, Monica Bejarano, to present that information, because I don't want to mess up her plan. I want to let her speak for that comprehensive outreach plan, which she has been working diligently on.
¿Cuánto tiempo, si ponen el RFC, cuánto tiempo llevaría para poder traer a otra compañía para traducción?
How long is it going to take you to bring another company to do the translations?
That's a good question. If we're the board to approve in this upcoming fiscal year's budget additional funds for another service that specializes or is more reliable with in-person services, we would first have to include it in the budget, and then once it's included in the budget, staff would perform what's known as a request for proposals, with RFP, which is essentially putting the the work out for bid. In other words, different companies can bid to say, I want to perform that service. So that's how that process works. The city already has a list of vendors as well, and so oftentimes they're notified, there's this new bid that came in, and so you can apply. Or if we know of a particular a vendor that is in the area and may want to apply, we can inform them as well that they can apply. And so that's the process. It takes usually about at least a couple of months to go through the whole RFP process of selecting someone or a business, and then several months to implement it once that's done. So it could be, up to 3 or 4 months before we have a new service in place after the fiscal year starts in July.
Vice Chair, we would need to vote for extended time at 8:16.
Okay.
So we're approaching the 3-hour mark at 8:16.
And would that be done by a motion? Or
Yeah, we will have to take a motion and vote, so forth.
Okay.
So,
Do we have to say a specific time we're extending it, or just?
yes, you have to indicate how long, right?
Well, you can either say a specific time, or you can say until the item is completed.
Until what?
Until the item is completed.
Okay.
So you can extend it until we're finished with this item, or you can extend it for, let's just, 30 minutes, for example. And in 30 minutes, come back and figure out what you want to do. Does that make sense?
It does. And can we say does it have to be until this item is, or until the end of the agenda? Can we say that?
You can say until the end of the agenda. I'm not sure if, that's fine. Whether or not you'll get all the votes we'll see. But, well, yes, you can say that.
Can I ask
Okay.
if you guys are okay to extend it until the end of the agenda?
So are you making a motion?
Yeah?
Okay.
Yes. I make a motion that we extend the meeting till the end of the agenda.
Okay. Can I have a second? Okay, let me take a vote. Board Member Dawkins?
Yes.
Board Member Espinoza?
Yes.
Board Member Height?
Yes.
Vice Chair Guadalupe?
Yes.
And motion passes to extend the meeting time to the end of the agenda with Chair Cantor absent. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I say we continue with this item now? Okay. We will continue with this item.
I can't remember where exactly we were. I think we're still in questions.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Thank you for that. Thanks, Cynthia. So it sounds like we would have to make a motion to direct staff to find a new translation company?
As
Right?
when we bring the budget before, yes. The answer is yes. The board would need to direct staff to do an RFP to find a new vendor, and that would be included in the budget process. So we would need direction from the board on that. Obviously, we can make that as a recommendation, but ultimately the board directs staff to do that.
And this will happen when we're going over the budget. Is that correct?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
We would make this recommendation or direct staff when we're going over the actual budget.
Right, because right now, we're not presenting any numbers or options for the board. This is just a general overview, high-level overview. But when we do bring the draft budget and we say, this is what we think it's going to cost, this is all the details associated with the plan, the board, of course, has to approve the staff's recommendation or make their own, or include their own input or recommendations or alter, things so that the board, their input is included.
Understood. Thank you. Good.
If I may, Vice Chair, just to add just a little bit of clarification. The budget, when you all consider the budget in a few months or a few weeks, that activity is just to put money aside into different buckets to pay for costs that are going to be coming up in the next fiscal year, that's separate from the RFP. So after you pass your budget and you got all your buckets, allocated, staff will come the next meeting perhaps and say to the rent board, okay, you put money into this bucket. We need you to authorize us to issue an RFP so then that we can get a contract and start spending the money you put into the bucket. So you won't, I don't think I've seen it where you direct staff to issue an RFP at the same time that you're approving your budget. It's usually after you approved your budget, and then the following meeting, you're directing staff to then issue the RFP to start filling in the contracts.
Understood.
Does that make sense?
Okay.
But they're really close in time, so, yeah.
There should be usually the meeting after we
Yeah,
approve the budget.
typically.
Understood. Thank you. Okay. Did you have any more comments? Anybody? Okay. I actually had two quick questions. Well, hopefully they're quick. For the outreach and community education, on the workshops and webinars, how many people attend those? Do you know?
So that is a good question. Things have evolved over time. In the beginning of the program, it was all in person. We would have a tally of how many people would come and what have you. And our numbers were pretty high, especially at the beginning of the program. When the pandemic hit and we moved to remote work, our presentations were webinars, live webinars. And the attendance at those webinars was hit or miss. Sometimes we'd have several dozen attendees, and sometimes we'd have 3. And what we realized is then it evolved into us realizing that it actually, in many cases, makes more sense to pre-record the presentation in both English and Spanish, and then post it and have it there for the public. So the only disadvantage of that, of course, is that there isn't a Q&A process. We are now, as part of the comprehensive outreach planning in this upcoming fiscal year to do in-person events again and kind of go back to what we were doing. We learned a lot from the pandemic in terms of the value of these pre-recorded workshops, particularly because we didn't, our staffing was limited, but it also allowed for staff to really, refine the workshop and make it really tight and presentable. But like I said, our goal is to transition back into in-person workshops this coming year, fiscal year.
Got you. Thank you for that. And I guess a follow-up to that would be, I know a few people have mentioned how it's hard to make some of the webinars when people are working. Is there any consideration of making them later when people are either home or are more likely to attend?
Interesting. Yes. So when we first opened, our presentations were usually in the evenings. I can't remember the exact time, but either mornings or evenings on Saturdays, right? Mornings on Saturdays. So we actually did them every Saturday. When the pandemic came, we then started doing it at various days. And we did learn that, like you said, that it makes more sense to hold them later on in the day. But now that they're pre-recorded, you can watch them anytime.
Right. But like you said, it eliminates the Q&A.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
Gotcha. So we're more likely going to go back to ideally Saturdays or a day that more people
We want to establish a time, whether it's a Saturday or evening time, where people can attend. Because we do understand that people have busy lives, and it's difficult to attend workshops during the day, during the daytime. And also, I mean, frankly, even in the evening, it's difficult for a lot of folks, right? So Saturdays were ideal, but that assumes you have a fully functioning, machine. Where all staff are available to do that. And we're essentially back to that point now.
Understood. Okay, thank you for that.
At these workshops, what's the percentage of renters? Is it more landlords or that show up or renters?
Generally, we've had higher attendance among landlords.
Yeah, it makes sense.
And, depending on the subject matter, you get lower or higher attendance from tenants. So that's the trend. It is tenants, it appears that it's more challenging for them to come to the workshops, especially if they're during the weekday.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. And seeing no further questions? No, just kidding.
No sé si mi pregunta esté bien.
I don't know if my question is right.
Pero después de que dan sus servicios, ¿ustedes piden una evaluación?
After to the company or
No, después de que dan los servicios, por ejemplo, la persona viene, pide ayuda al reembor, como las personas que vinieron hace un rato, y después de eso ellos les piden alguna evaluación para decir si fue fácil, que si fue difícil, o que estuvo bien o que estuvo mal.
Okay, after a person participate in your workshops, on your webinars, do you make like an evaluation to that people if they understood and if they know how is the plan and if it was good for them or no?
We haven't done that in a very long time. I think we originally did that. Yeah. Yeah, we had, that's right. So when they were in person, we had comment cards. If people could make recommendations or say, I didn't understand this part, but since the pandemic, we haven't done that.
Board Member Espinosa, permítame si puedo, I wanted to add, from my understanding of your question, you meant to say after a community member receives the services, do you guys do any evaluation?
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
So just generally any service?
Mm-hmm.
No, we have not. However, you may recall that last year's budget included an item for a tenant survey, and we have been working with partners to conduct a citywide survey on the impact of the rent ordinance. And that's expected to be completed probably by the end of this fiscal year. Because they're in the process of sending out the postcards for folks to respond to those survey questions.
Gotcha. And the way they're responding is they're sending a mailing
It's,
it back?
there's a postcard that's sent out, and then on the postcard, you have to text a certain number, and then you go through the whole survey through via text.
Understood. And is that going out to renters and housing providers?
It's only going out to renters. The goal, I think last fiscal year, we mentioned that we're going to be doing one for tenants this fiscal year, and then focus on landlords in another fiscal year.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. No more? Okay. Seeing no further questions, Madam Clerk, please call the public speakers, if any.
We did have one public speaker, but she's not present. So no speakers on this item.
Okay. Does there?
Vice Chair Guadalupe, it would be helpful for staff if there's any parts of this presentation that board members want to make sure that staff it's emphasized that it's important for any particular board member, that issue is important and why. Because we want to make sure that when we bring back a draft budget, that it reflects some of the input provided by the board.
Are we able to email those to staff?
I think so,
Or
right?
does it need to
I
be
don't
in
know.
person?
That's a general counsel question.
Well, if you email it to staff, you can, but then staff might not even consider the idea because an individual board member cannot direct staff to do anything. It takes the whole board. So let's say you really want to see the comprehensive outreach plan come back and you want greater detail and everything you want. If you email that, it may or may not happen. But if you direct staff as a board, it will happen. That's the difference.
So say it during our meetings.
Yeah. So like right now, as you are currently in this meeting, if you direct staff, come back with a lot of detail, however you want, on the comprehensive outreach plan at your next meeting. They will come back with it. They have to. Or if you find that there's another priority, maybe it's not listed, maybe it is listed, that you want to see included in the budget. My recommendation is you all have the discussion now, if you can, and give a direction to staff. Not only for the reasons I mentioned, but I do know that some board members have mentioned to me that it's helpful to talk to other board members. And the Brown Act obviously doesn't allow you to do that outside of meetings. And so now it's kind of the time to bounce ideas off of each other and figure out what you want to see in a budget. And if you need more time, you can always tell staff you need more time and, come back and, you don't have to decide now.
I like that. I definitely would need more time to do that, yeah. So do I make a motion and ask for more time? How do we direct staff for more time?
So if, and executive director, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the executive director is soliciting your priorities, right? Like what does a board member want to see in a budget? What's important to you all? If you need more time, which is fine, you should probably talk to the executive director and deputy director and figure out the timing of the budget. Because they can't put together a budget until they hear your input. And if you take too much time, you're over the edge. I don't know how much time is enough time. So, does that make sense?
It does.
Okay, so you all can talk to each other and figure out the timeline of the budget, like when it's going to be presented and what the deadlines, and whether or not anything can be delayed to allow you all an opportunity to go home, think about it, and come back and weigh in on what your priorities are.
What do the priorities need to be said in, do we have to make a motion? Do we need a vote? Or can we go around the table and just be like, for me, these are my priorities?
I'd say the latter is appropriate for you to say, I've looked at the presentation and I really agree with this, or I want to add this, or I disagree with that, or whatever.
Understood.
If you do the latter, which is completely fine, who knows what's incorporated, right? The latter is good to facilitate a discussion. Board Member Guadalupe, you might have a few suggestions, and Board Member Dawkins might have other suggestions that may be consistent or not consistent. But if you all have suggestions and you're all saying things, who knows if everything gets incorporated? So you come back to the next meeting, you might feel a certain way because your suggestions weren't put in. Right. So you discuss as a body all your various suggestions, and then it's probably best you come to a consensus as to what you can all agree on, and then direct staff. That way, you're guaranteed to have that in the budget. It's your budget.
Understood. That makes sense. Thank you for that. Okay, so Nicholas, what is our timeline like? How much wiggle room do we have?
We don't have a lot of time. Because we've missed several meetings, and because there's a possibility that there may be other canceled meetings, we don't know, as you saw today with the interpretation issues. It's important that we get through the recommendations and feedback today, at least, general. It doesn't have to be specific, like going into every detail, but it is important that we hear from the board today so that we can at least come back at the next board meeting with a draft budget. So the board has heard the staff's recommendations. We think there should be more resources in compliance because we have concerns about collection, because collection has been suffering as a result of the pandemic. We also think that because of the significant rise in petitions filed, and the trend is still continuing, that we need additional resources in hearings. And we also believe that there may be a need for additional resources for outreach and community education. We can have a discussion about what that might look like in terms of staffing and in terms of how that might impact the budget today. And then we'll bring back the numbers like, okay, it's going to cost X amount to do all these things we want to do. And then at that board meeting, the board is going to have to decide, do we want to do everything that everybody wants? Do we have to trim some of it back because the budget is getting too big? It's going to impact the fee too much, and it might impact collections. So it's important that we hear from board members today, I really think this is important. I really think this is important. And then in the end, if the board feels comfortable, you can include all those suggestions and we can bring them back. Now, that doesn't mean that your desires or your recommendations will be included in the final budget. That's going to be parsed out, discussed by the board when we bring the draft budget, and likely a second draft budget before we actually bring the final budget, draft budget, for the board to potentially approve.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, really, how are the rest of the board members feeling capacity-wise? And are you guys up for it? I also don't want it to feel rushed, and it is 8:34. I don't know if staff has had a really long day. So how are you guys feeling? How's everybody feeling right now?
I sat up straight when I heard you say today.
At least initial feedback. We don't need, you to present it on a silver platter. But if you say, I agree with you on this, or I'm concerned about that, then we'll know that is and then if the board says, yes, I agree with that board member, let's pass a motion to approve that recommendation, then we'll come back with those recommendations.
Well, I have a comment. I'm trying to remember. I had it written out, but I don't have it with me. But you and I discussed before, and I think when you began this, you said that most budgets, this budget for the rent program, is mostly salaries and benefits and that kind of thing. And I think I shared with you my concern that I didn't see any percentage for programs, like how much for outreach, how much for, I can't think of the other things. In other words, I think I asked you to present some part of the budget that would show monies allocated to programs as opposed to salaries and benefits. Am I making sense? I'm trying to remember.
Yes.
Maybe what else do we do for people? In other words, I think one of the things I shared with you, I've been a renter in Richmond for 7.5 years. I haven't received one thing from the rent board about anything from the rent program. All of these mailings have been to landlords and other things, but I, as a tenant, concerned about a variety of things, have received nothing from this program. And I think you did mention that in May and June, there is going to be a mailing that's going to go out to tenants, which I look forward to. But again, when I look at your budget, and I understand that it has to be salaries and benefits, but there can be a different perspective on the budget. It has to do with programs. And forgive me, I can't think of anything else other than outreach and education, but maybe somebody else.
Can I make a quick comment? part of the reason we don't present the budget in terms of programs is because, number one, it would require us to somehow delineate the number of hours each staff person works on any particular thing. And the problem is that, for example, our housing counselors, they advise landlords and tenants about rights and responsibilities, but they also interact with the billing and registration unit. The billing and registration unit works with the public information unit to determine whether a unit should be charged or not. The legal unit works with all of the different units. And so breaking up General Counsel Oshanunga's salary in terms of, he does X amount for this and X amount for that isn't really practical or
I
doable.
appreciate the problem, and I agree with you, and that's
Yeah.
not practical. I just want to see something besides that, you named a couple of things that were done just now. Well, why can't there be something, if it's not money, time,
That's also,
emphasis?
yeah,
I mean, something that gives me that there is something else going on besides the personnel of the rent program.
so,
And I'm sorry for being so vague, but and I can't recall the details of our conversation, so perhaps I'll send an email.
Okay.
The problem is I can't share it with the other board members. So, anyway, that was my concern. That I would like to see, and I keep going back to outreach, I want to see more that's being done. And as a tenant, I can tell you, I personally feel that nothing's been done on my behalf. Now, maybe there has been, but I haven't received one postcard, nothing, after 7.5 years of living as a tenant in this city. So that's my comment.
Yeah, so at least it sounds like that is one thing that we can all agree on, is the fact that one of our priorities is more outreach to tenants and outreach and education. Because I would agree, I've been a Richmond resident and renter for over 20 years now. And
yeah, I mean, so we do more, let's say we want to do more outreach. We want to do more mass mailings. The mass mailings have a specific price. X amount for so many postcards or so many envelopes or what have you. We can present that and say, this is how much it's going to cost to do an AGA mass mailing or another mass mailing. However, most of the resources associated with that project are staffing related. So we have, for example, staff that work on a variety of outreach activities and they have a certain bandwidth. Once they've reached that bandwidth and they can't, if we push them to do more than they can possibly do, that presents other deleterious impacts on the agency, including staff burnout, potential worker comp cases, lawsuits, kind of situations where you end up having a dysfunctional organization because there aren't enough staff to support the services. Right.
your mic is off.
We don't want to go there, and as our executive director, I'm sure you won't let us.
Do my best, yeah.
But anyway.
Okay. So if it sounds like we're ready to make a motion and recommendation, is that okay? Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. Does anybody want to make a motion, or can I?
Well, I would like to make the motion that we receive the presentation regarding the rent program budget timeline and requirements for the fiscal year of 2024-25 rent program operating budget.
If I may, I'm sorry, Vice Chair. You don't have to make a motion to receive anything. It's already been received, because that's what you've been doing the whole time. If there were a motion, it'd likely be related to whatever priorities you want to see brought back. And I think there was a schedule. I'm not sure where the schedule went on the computer. Yeah, so there's a timeline there, and I think the staff has suggested that if there's a meeting on the 29th, they're going to bring a draft budget recommendation and options to the board for feedback, input, and direction. And May 7th, it's another meeting where staff brings another draft budget to the board for additional feedback and direction. I think that April 29th would be the time if you don't feel prepared now. Because again, you got to remember, it's the rent board's budget. If you don't feel prepared now, April 29th would probably be the time where you can actually say everything you want to say. It doesn't mean that you can make your recommendation tonight, that's fine, but that should not foreclose the idea that you can come back on the 29th with new ideas and everything you got going on in your heads for your priorities. It's just that we're on a strict timeline, obviously. That's the opposing force.
That was going to be my follow-up question. So if we do make a motion now to recommend one thing, we can still add additional stuff on April 29th?
It's your budget. It gets passed by you. You can add additional stuff until the deadline. As long as you can pass it on time and there's enough time to get the fees passed by city council, because that's another hurdle right there. But yeah, this conversation should be involved, and every board member should go back home and marinate in what's being said and come back with whatever brilliant ideas you all have.
Does it make sense for the board for us to make a motion to make a recommendation and make the outreach and education a priority as we think about what else we may want to add for the 29th?
I like that idea.
Yeah? Okay, awesome. So, do we have a motion?
Is that motion withdrawn that Mr. Board
I
Member Height?
withdraw the motion that I had previously made.
Thank you.
So do we have a new motion?
I don't know how to couch the words.
Am I able to make a motion? Okay, awesome. So I want to make a motion that we direct staff to make the outreach and community education a priority for our budget meeting, for our next budget meeting, and for us to just keep this conversation open.
I second.
Okay, I'll take a vote. Board Member Dawkins?
Yes.
Board Member Espinoza?
Yes.
Board Member Height?
Yes.
Vice Chair Guadalupe?
Yes.
Okay, motion passes with Chair Cantor absent.
Thank you.
Can I say something real quick? Yeah, I have the floor. Is this appropriate?
Board Member Height?
Okay, I just want to say that if we look at the number of cases that the rent board has handled and stuff, like, in the line, in our budget that we got, the packet that we got for this meeting, there, if you look at everything, the amount of people that are staffed and the amount of work they've done, I think they're working pretty much at full capacity now. I think we really have to worry about adding more people to continue the quality. Because I know a few people that have gone in and they've gotten good quality advice, but I was looking at that, and if I was working, these guys are working their asses off. So.
And I would agree with that. I just that your analysis makes sense. If I take a look at the different things that are being done, the number of cases, the number of people, and then do my arithmetic, I'll figure, my God, they're working really hard. I guess when I was asking for a different perspective is that be said in words so I don't have to do the arithmetic. Maybe that's what I'm getting at, is that talk to us besides salaries and benefits. They were important, but there was a different way of looking at things. Or should they?
Yeah, I understand. I will say that our job as staff is to present to the board what we believe are the needs of the agency based on the feedback we receive from staff. And as I mentioned, compliance was a big one. That was probably the highest level of importance, because if we are unable to collect successfully the rental housing fee, it puts us in a situation where we could potentially have deficits. If we have deficits, then we have to go to the city and ask them for money. If we receive loans from the city has more control, more leverage over the program. We have less autonomy, so they can pretty much tell us to do X, Y, and Z a lot better. The other issue is that if we have lower compliance in terms of collecting the fee, it also impacts our ability to collect the fee going forward. So let me put it this way. If we put ourselves in a situation where we're financially suffering, it adds additional stress on staff as well. And with that additional stress, trying to manage a budget that we have, that's resulted in a deficit, it also leads to morale issues also among staff. And that can have an impact on the organization as a whole. So compliance is a big one. The other big one is hearings and appeals, the whole petition process. With our petitions increasing by almost 400%, it's resulted in our staff having to do more and more work. And it gets to the point where some of it's not sustainable. And we've learned lessons from the past. When we first opened, a lot of staff were working really long hours to make the program successful. But it also led to issues issues around burnout, issues around staff feeling overworked, and that has can result in worker comp cases. It can result in other things like that.
Now you're making me nervous. In the last few sentences, you've talked about a lot of negative things that could happen. And I think I agree with Jim that everything that we see, your staff has been working marvelously.
Mm-hmm.
And we're very proud to be associated with this program. Besides the fact, I personally, and I'm sure the board does, trust you to prevent all those awful things from happening.
Mm-hmm.
That's why you're here.
That's right.
So we don't, at least I certainly have no fear of those things happening. And I don't think that was, at least not the point of my comments.
No, I understand.
So please, all of those awful things you mentioned, please keep those from happening like you've been doing.
We are doing our best. And part of the reason we're bringing these budget recommendations is to help prevent some of that as well. Anyways.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but the item has been voted on, and the item is actually closed.
Oh.
And so we
Discussion's
have
over.
to move on to the next
Thank you.
item. Yes.
The next item on the agenda is item L under announcements and scheduling.
Our next special meeting is scheduled for April 29th, and it's very important that we have a quorum. If we don't have a quorum for that meeting, then we'll have to hold another special meeting on May 7th in order to catch up. Other than that, the only other thing to mention is that we recently, as I mentioned during the presentation, hired an office assistant who we're training, so we are excited about the addition of the new staff person, and we'll be inviting that staff person to say hello to the board, introduce themselves at the next board meeting. That's it. And that's it.
Okay. Thank you for that. So meeting is adjourned at 8:53 p.m. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.